And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with Scoop Duck on 3, coming to you on Monday, June 17th, 2024 from Long Beach, California. Got a big episode in store for you guys today. It's a Mailbag Monday with my guy, Travis Rook-Lay, and it is going to be a fun episode as always. But before we get into that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but you should head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Not rolling solo, like I mentioned. We are here on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel with my guy, Travis Rook-Lay, who is kind enough to join us all the way from Maui, Hawaii. How we doing, Travis? Are you living your best life?
Can't complain over here. Sun's out, up in the early morning, but excited to talk some ball. And yeah, just happy to be back. Little mailbag. Thanks to all the listeners, obviously, popping in a bunch of great questions. So excited to get to it today.
And as most of you guys probably know at this point, we do kind of tend to give a little bit more priority, if you will, to our Scoop Duck readers and subscribers. So I post a thread over on the boards over there, and then that is usually the main source of our questions. But I'll also pop over on Twitter and get some questions over there. So just another reminder. Come see us at Scoop Duck. Try us out for just $1. Get you a whole month of access. There's no better time, seeing that it is a crucial time in the recruiting calendar, and the Ducks are ramping things up with the biggest weekend of the year coming up this weekend. So try us out. $1, 1 month. Can't ask for more than that. But Travis, man, let's get to it, man. Enough with the fun and games. Let's get to these questions.
Let's do it. So I think stemming from some conversations in the national media, I know Josh Pate did a segment last night that caused a little turmoil in Duckland, ranking the Huskies environment louder than ours. But question, lately there's been a lot of chatter about the loudest and most hostile environments in college football. Where would you place Autzen in that mix?
This is always a fun question to talk about, right, Travis? But admittedly, I only have so much of a scope because I haven't traveled as much as I maybe want to. I tend to travel more for high school because recruiting is kind of my main priority. But obviously, I'll make it up to Eugene. I've been out to Husky Stadium in Seattle, been to the Rose Bowl. I've been to the Coliseum, but haven't seen a game there. I know it's usually like halfway full. But I did go out to the Shoe, and that was really, really loud. So, I mean, I think Oregon is right up there. I feel like you usually find it landing in the top 5 territory, top 10 at the very least. And I think for Oregon, you have to give them some credit just because it is a smaller stadium. I think tops out at what, like 56,000 maybe at Autzen. So, and I also think just with it being a small town, that makes it even more impressive, the crowds that they're able to draw out there in Eugene. But I think it's up there. I've been to one game at Husky Stadium in Seattle, and that was pretty loud. That was in 2021, I think, for Oregon versus Washington. But I got to go as a fan that time, so it was fun to just kind of hang out. And I feel like a lot of fans aren't going to like to hear this, but it was an awesome environment, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it wasn't really hard to see why, if you were a Husky fan, you would enjoy that kind of atmosphere and that setting. But the question was mainly about loudness and hostility, and I think basically you got to put Oregon right up there. But at the same time, the closest thing I had to compare that to would probably be Ohio State, because that was deafening in 2021. We got to spend most of the game, when I went out there for Oregon Ohio State, we got to spend most of the game up in the press box, but it's glassed off, so you don't get to hear really how loud it is. But we got to go down there at the end, and yeah, you could hear, it's like 100,000 plus. I think you could hear that place roaring for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Horseshoe, I was at that game too, is like I feel like the loudest moments were pretty dang loud. That's what I remember about it. I mean, credit to the Ducks for obviously taking that crowd out of the game for large segments of it. But I definitely think in terms of like pure noise at specific moments, that was up there. And as you said, I mean, I was at the game in Seattle last year, which I think is where Pate and some of those other national media are getting that kind of taste of Husky Stadium. I mean, that was certainly up there as well. And I think those games in those big moments got there. I mean, as to Oregon specifically, I mean, I think there's kind of two segments of the fan base that can speak to this. But for those of us that have been going to games since, 2001, we still got a little ways to get back to the 01 to I'd say like 2012, 2013, 2014 level. And I don't think that's on Duck fans specifically. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that from, just a changing generation to ticket prices outpricing some of those like true diehard fans. I think that Autzen's got back there in the past few years to having like specific games that feel like the Autzen some of us grew up with. But I think that this year, with the demand, with the run up to the season, obviously that Ohio State game is one a lot of us are circling, and there'll certainly be a national presence there. But I think for a large portion of us, this is the year like we're targeting is like this is going to feel hopefully like the old Autzen in terms of just like that, like rowdy, on you atmosphere all game. That's what everyone always speaks to when they talk about Oregon is like the fans feel like they're on top of you. As you said, that like smaller environment. Some of those bigger stadiums are built out. I'm going to Michigan this year, and you don't hear Michigan being talked about as like one of the louder stadiums. There's 108,000 people there, but it's built like this. I don't know. I'm just super excited to see what that specifically that Ohio State brings, and I think you'll probably see Oregon move up the boards of a few of those national conversations after that game.
My last game that I was able to go to, Travis, was the USC game last year, and that was a game you knew fans were fired up for. Just seeing that Caleb Williams, reigning Heisman Trophy winner, presumptive number one overall pick, ended up being the number one overall pick. Like Duck fans got up for that game, and even though I think the box score didn't really tell the full story, it was not as close as the score maybe showed. But especially for when Oregon was on defense, like that place was roaring. So that was definitely one of my better memories at Autzen. But I got to start looking into my tickets for that Ohio State game, man, because that's got game of the year written all over it. And it's going to be hard to find many more games with anticipation that match that, and early season implication, mid season implication.
Yeah, and I just want to give a quick shout just along with that question. Like I will say, I've been to a lot of these environments. I've been lucky to attend a lot of Duck games. Rice Eccles in Salt Lake is pretty freaking awesome of an environment. I was there in a couple disaster games in the last few years, and that's as good of an environment as I've been in terms of noise, in terms of fans like being into the game. I feel like when I look at some of these lists, that does not get enough of a shout. So I think you're going to have some Big 12 teams who go into Salt Lake City, maybe underestimating what that place is like playing in, and have a little bit of a rude awakening.
Yeah, that I want to go to a game out there for sure. I mean, the fact that Oregon was able to just dismantle Utah like they did last year, I don't want to say it. I think I was kind of shocked by it at first, but like we saw, like that game really just took the wind out of Utah's sails last year, and I think that should have been expected, right? With all the crazy injuries they were battling, no Cam Rising, it wasn't that much of a shock. But I mean, we've continued to hear really good things about Rice Eccles Stadium, and I definitely want to make it out there one day. Although it looks like it won't be for an Oregon game at this point.
Hey, a little playoff game, you never know. We'll see.
Maybe.
I wouldn't hate it. All right, let's move on. Next question. I was a little surprised we didn't take a linebacker transfer with Jacobs' injury history and the inexperienced backup behind him and Bassa, especially moving into a more physical, run-focused conference. How close were we to taking a transfer, and did we miss out on someone we really wanted, or did the coaches see enough from Devin Jackson and Jerry Mixon to feel comfortable?
I think this is more the latter. Rather than missing on someone. And a big part of that is because I don't remember hearing a lot about Oregon maybe taking a transfer at linebacker. Obviously, the return of Bossa and Jacobs kind of supercharged that linebacker room. And then I think you do have some confidence, a lot of confidence, especially in Devin Jackson. I think I've been hearing more about Devin Jackson this offseason than I have Jerry Mixon. But I had one one source close to the program that I spoke with that told me pretty confidently that they think that Mixon is going to be better than Bossa long term, which I thought was pretty exciting to hear, because he's just a really, really athletic guy. I think with Devin Jackson, you obviously constantly hear about that guy's speed, how he's one of the fastest players on the entire team, even as a linebacker, which is crazy. But with Mixon, I think maybe you see a little bit more versatility and just overall athleticism when you're looking at a guy that played linebacker, running back, edge rusher, even some quarterback. He did everything at Sacred Heart before he got to Oregon, out in the Bay Area. So I'm super excited about both of those guys. But I think Devin Jackson probably projects to have a bit more of a notable impact this year in that two deep behind Bossa and Jacobs.
Yeah. I know specifically to that question about transfers. I know there was a Maryland transfer linebacker that we were on a little bit early who ended up committing to Michigan, but I think that was the only guy. And I think it was one of those situations, like you said, where, there was a guy out there the staff felt like totally solid about, could come in, contribute. You probably take him, but due to the room, the experience Jackson and Mixon got a little bit last year. And I think the three true freshmen, you can see those guys playing early. I know a couple of them had some big moments in the spring game. I know the guys I trust in terms of like watching film and seeing some of that more like developmental stuff, like I have really, really high hopes for that guy. So I think that it comes with, like we've talked about with the offensive line too. I think a lot of Duck fans like love this idea of we have some entrenched starters, but like, why can't we get some more transfers for depth? It's like guys are often transferring to start. It's hard to go out to the portal and find a couple of linebackers and say, hey, we have these two established guys. They're going to start. You want to come be a backup here? More oftentimes than not, that's the reason the guy's in the portal in the first place, is they want a new situation when it comes to that. So I think, that's just going to be a hard thing always when it comes to that and trying to build depth at that position. I think that puts the importance on high school recruiting. And the Ducks signed 3 guys last year that I know the staff are incredibly excited about. And I'd be surprised if you don't see at least one of those true freshmen contributing pretty early this year.
I tend to find myself in that same frame of mind. I think 1 out of the 3 is pretty safe, but also I think reasonable, if that makes sense. Like you're not overstepping and you're also just falling in line with what those guys bring to the table. I think the last thing that I'll add about the linebacker spot, Travis, and I feel like I've forgotten about it more than I should have this offseason when I'm talking about linebackers at Oregon. Bryce Betcher, Connor Sewelli, both of those guys are still there. And I think that Betcher has seen more of the field than Sewelli maybe has. He's been making all those baseball headlines with their season going into the postseason. I think it's over now, but he is someone that I think I maybe haven't mentioned enough in that linebacker room when you're talking about the two deep. I think you probably see some combination of Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson, unless Jerry Mixon is able to overtake one of those guys. Maybe Betcher just because he brings a little bit more to the table athletically, or maybe side to side, sideline to sideline. But that's a really good linebacker room, and I'd love to see one of those 3 true freshmen break through early. And I tend to kind of go more towards Braden Platt, but you never know. It'd be cool to see Dylan Williams do it because he's from right down the road from me at Long Beach Poly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's set up in a great way, where you're returning basically 6 guys, including those 2 you just mentioned that have played. And that gives you a little bit of runway to, introduce these 3 true freshmen to the mix, and you get them some reps early in the season, see which one kind of pops. You have time until your, biggest stretch of the year. Obviously, Ohio State hits in, early October, but really you need to be humming when it comes to late November, December into January. And so you have some runway, not only at linebacker, but at safety, to some of these other positions where you have some experience, but I think a lot of us who are closer to the program would think that like our top end guys sometimes are on the younger range. I know at linebacker and safety, that's the case for sure. So we have time to like get them up to speed with some good playable depth in place for now to kind of get us through that first part of the season.
I was muted for a second. Talking with my guy, Travis Rokoy, here on a Monday afternoon, doing a little bit of Oregon football and recruiting mailbag on the Duck Dish podcast. We're coming to you on the Scoop Duck YouTube channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. The growth we've been seeing on the channel is awesome, and really can't say thank you guys enough. But continue to spread the word as we grow our community here on YouTube. Travis, what do you got for us next?
Yep, let's hop to which player that Oregon signed out of high school last year and didn't have much of an impact will have the most impact this season. Essentially, who's the breakout star that isn't a transfer?
Okay. I think the guy that I'm hearing some good stuff about is probably Solomon Davis. If we're just looking in the secondary, I think that he is a younger guy that now has his legs underneath him. I think he is. I know he is one of the more under the radar signings that the Ducks had in the 2023 class out of Southern California, out of Charter Oak, which is a pretty big school in my neck of the woods here in Southern California. It's not a Trinity League school necessarily, but like they are a very consistent program. And I know that he's had an interesting journey at Oregon. I think he came in as more of a corner, but then it looked like they transitioned him a little bit more into a safety role, nickel role. And that just speaks to his versatility. If you're able to move back, and then if you're a nickel, I think, or even a safety, you're just kind of taking on more responsibility, right? You're kind of that last line of defense. So I've heard some good things about Solomon Davis, and I think that he is probably one of those guys that we need to put out there on the radar and discuss more, because with the secondary, understandably so, but most of the names that we're focused on right now are transfers. So let's give a little bit of shine and a little bit of insight into those younger guys that have been in the program for a little bit and are maybe ready to take that step forward. I think you could also probably put Dalen Austin into that conversation, but we're still waiting to see how things shake out with him right now here in the summer.
Yeah, and you can see just like with Davis and Autzen and these different guys, just like that athletic profile in the secondary, how much it's changed over the last few years, just in terms of that size, speed, athleticism. You can tell that this staff's really like prioritizing those traits at that position with those guys you mentioned this year with Fields, some of the other guys we signed, Iffy. So I think that room is in such a good place that I think that there's just so many guys that I think will be ready to play this year. It's just a matter of who pops. I think that my answers are probably a little bit more boring when it comes to that. Some of the guys I had down, obviously Kenyon Sadiq, I think is going to get a lot of time this year. Had a little bit of an impact at different times last year, but I think that he'll see a lot more opportunities this year. I think Amari Washington on the defensive line is going to have a chance to play a ton. And then I think just some of those guys that we saw like in phases this year, I think you'll see a huge jump out of them. So I think about a Blake Purchase, who had different like flashes throughout the year and opportunities as a pass rusher. Obviously Tuioti and Mateo played a lot. So I think that just you'll see that like second year jump from a lot of those guys that I think we saw flashes out of this year. I think this is the year you'll really see them move into roles where they're like, really impactful in some of those, bigger games, not just kind of using opportunities throughout, garbage time and different things to develop those reps that they need.
I like the Purchase pick because we saw a pretty good amount of him, and I think that I'm just excited to see what that next step is for him. And then the defensive line is a group that is just loaded with talent, but not a lot of proven production aside from some of these veterans like Caldwell and Derek Harmon. So you're going to have to see, what they bring to the table. And then Birch, obviously, like those are a little bit more known commodities, but I still feel like what we're seeing on the field, Travis, doesn't necessarily tell the full story with how truly deep Oregon's defensive line is. Like looking at guys like a huge Terrence Green or Jaden Moore, Amari Washington, who we talked about, Michael Gardner. Like these are all names that I feel like I haven't really talked about in almost a year because they came in as recruits. So I did what I always do. I profiled them as high school recruits, got interviews with them, told their story, got some of the background, and now it's just a matter of waiting. Okay, who breaks through? Who can get on the field? Who can get on the field in meaningful games? Perhaps more importantly, right? We know Oregon has some non-con games that maybe won't draw quite the attention that some of those conference games will, but that's when you'll really be able to tell, Travis, who's the real deal. Who are some of these younger guys that haven't played a lot that are now playing a lot and playing in important situations?
Yeah, and I think that when it comes, I mean, man, are they going to have an opportunity with, as you mentioned, Birch, Harmon, Caldwell. Those guys are going to take up blockers. So you're not going to see a Purchase, a Mateo, a Tuioti. Like you're getting single coverage all game at best with those three. So I think the opportunity is there for one of those pass rushers specifically to step up because you got three experienced dudes next to you who are all probably NFL guys. So you're going to have a ton of opportunities in terms of how this defense is designed to get to the quarterback. And I'd be pretty dang surprised if at least one of them doesn't pop and have a pretty nice looking sack number this year.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're hoping for. I think Tatum Tuioti was maybe one of the biggest surprises on defense the whole year last year. I had some sources I was talking to on the coaching staff that were, telling me about how excited they were about Tatum, and you can kind of keep an eye on him. But obviously, when guys are playing in Oregon, not to take a dig at Oregon, but like you just don't really know what you're going to get. They're not playing top tier competition every week. Now Tuioti is a little bit different, right? I think he grew up in Hawaii, then he moved to Nebraska when his dad was coaching there. So it's a little bit harder to get a read on that, but I think getting to play ball in a bunch of different places is an advantage and a good thing because you're exposed to different play styles, calibers of player. But Tuioti definitely has to be one of those guys that you're really excited for, especially with how he's changed his body. I think put on some good weight heading into year 2 with the Ducks.
100%. Kind of good transition here. Just speaking of those defensive linemen and their kind of NFL prospects, if players in the team live up to your expectations for them, how many Ducks do you think get drafted in the 2025 draft? How about 11 as an over/under?
Oof, this is a really tough one. I'm kind of like making a little bit of a list here just on the fly, Travis. So we'll just workshop this in real time. We'll do offense and defense. I'm just trying to see what I
Yeah,
think here.
I was just going by position, which was like the easiest way in my mind. So I had Gabriel as a maybe. I think the size and arm strength piece is a challenge, but we'll see there. I think you'll probably get at least one running back. I'd put that at 1. I'd put receiver Stewart for sure. And I got to think, given his production, Tez Johnson gets a look. I don't know if that's draftable or not, but I think he's got a good shot. I think Terrence Ferguson will get drafted. I think if he goes, Cornelius and Connerly will both get drafted. If he goes, meaning Connerly, I think you'll see 3 defensive linemen who have a chance in terms of Harmon, Caldwell, and Birch. I think Jacobs has a dang good shot. And I think Bossa could probably maybe as like a hybrid safety at the NFL, but I think that his like size.
If Jamal Hill ended on a team, and I think you can kind of compare them a little bit because they're both converted safeties, right?
Yep.
Jamal Hill got drafted, right? Or was he a free agent? I want to say he was drafted, but I could be tripping.
I know he got signed. I'm not positive if it were late or just signed, but either way, I mean, he's on a roster.
6th round.
Okay, there you go. So, yeah, I mean, 11 sounds good. I think that they definitely have a chance, and if I had to bet on it, I'd say they set their record. I don't know what the program record is for most draft picks in a year, but
I think it was this year, right? At 8.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd venture to say we've never gotten double digits. And I think if things break right, as the question says, I don't see any reason why that's not going to be double digits.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy to say that, Travis, because of all the talent that they just lost, right? but you did see some key pieces hang around, mainly Jordan Birch, Tez Johnson, um, Jordan James, Noah Whittington, especially amid that move with Carlos Lachlan. Not that they would necessarily go to Ohio State, because that's most people think that's the best running back tandem in the country, if not one of the deepest rooms. But that's definitely something worth mentioning. I think Marcus Harper is a guy that could potentially play himself into the NFL draft conversation with a big year. I think he's a guy that maybe hasn't gotten enough attention as one of the more consistent pieces along a great offensive line since he has really broken through as a starter. So I think he would maybe be a name that you have to put into that mix. Maybe one of the safeties too, like Kobe Savage is a guy with high expectations. I think Brandon Johnson only has one more year left. So I think when you look at the guys that are returning and then the guys that are entering that draft eligible year, and then you add on the transfers, I think that 11 probably does make a good amount of sense.
Yep. 100%. Speaking of those running backs, I know a running back out there that's gotten a lot of, conversation around duck circles right now is Jordan Davison from down there at Modern Day in your hood. Question about him. Is there any specific reason Davison keeps dropping in the rankings? Was originally ranked 11 composite, 9.6. Now he's dropped a lot, long story short. What have you heard on Davison? And maybe just give us a little update on his recruitment kind of from your side of things.
Yeah, so I'm not involved in rankings in any way for On Three. I do know that I'm trying to kind of help us out a bit more with our West Coast presence, and just kind of put in a good word for some of the guys that catch my eye out here. And certainly Davison is one of those guys. I do remember last year that he was battling injury a decent amount. Like I think there was a playoff game or two where he maybe didn't even touch the ball very much. And they were able to kind of go with a combination of Nate Frazier, and then I think it's Ajon Bryant was their other guy that they had. So they were just so deep that they maybe didn't need him, and certainly wanted to preserve his body heading into that rematch with St. John Bosco in the CIF Southern Section Championship. And then yeah, so I think that's really kind of what it comes down to a little bit. I think his production has definitely been there. He plays in one of the best leagues in all of the country, really. I mean, the best league in Southern California, for sure. So I don't think there's too much for me to add other than the rankings. I don't think Oregon fans should be discouraged by that by any means. And then as for his recruitment, he was in Eugene this weekend for his official visit, and he's going to be heading out to Columbus for his official visit with the Buckeyes this weekend. And then it sounds like a decision is probably expected not too far, not too long after that Ohio State visit. And this is an Oregon versus Ohio State race. I think Rashad Samples has done a really good job of keeping Oregon alive, and then obviously trying to advance that even more in this recruitment, because he basically said that he was ready to cut Oregon out of his recruitment after Lachlan left to go to Ohio State. So, I mean, it's hard to, I think, really qualify that too much, Travis, because it's like, it's Oregon. Like obviously you're going to keep considering them. I think that you have to look at it from that standpoint, but then also give him some credit because he is a newer coach in this recruitment. I don't believe they had any pre-existing relationship at a place like Arizona State where Samples came from. So that's going to be an interesting one. The Buckeyes just added Isaiah West, their second 2025 running back pledge over the weekend out of Philadelphia, I want to say. So getting 3 running backs in a class is pretty tricky, not very common. And Oregon is still, very happy, I think, with Deer Hill, but they would love to add Jordan Davis into this mix. And what a colossal recruiting win that would be for Samples.
100%. And I think that I think the injury piece you alluded to, I think that's some of the big, from what I've read, I saw a couple national guys allude to it. I think in terms of the ranking, I know that was one of the major drivers in it. I think just anytime you lose a year of maybe like top end tape on a guy, whether he's banged up kind of throughout the season, I think that that's certainly going to have an impact. So I know specifically one of the big national guys has alluded to the fact that like they're going to kind of reevaluate Davison at the start of this year after seeing him. And I'm going to guess if he's fully healthy, he'll get that jump back to wherever he needs to be. But as you mentioned, I mean, I think that Samples has done everything he possibly can to get us in the game there. And be in a good spot. You never love seeing your main competitor have the last visit, but two running backs already on board. Obviously, the success we've had at Modern Day and that pipeline being built there, some teammates already being committed to landing in the Ducks in Eugene. I think that we're certainly in the game, and it seems like a decision is going to come pretty quick.
And I do need to do a little bit more digging on this one, Travis. And I feel like I don't want to like sell the fans short here, but my gut feeling lately has been maybe that Oregon has the slight edge, but I'm not ready to put in an RPM yet. I think a month or so ago, I was probably feeling like I was going to put one in for Ohio State, but I'm glad that I held off. And Oregon is, like you're saying, still very much alive here in the pursuit of Davison.
Yep. All right. Last question for the day here. Will Evan Stewart live up to the hype and be able to be that number one receiver? And can Terrence Ferguson have that special last year?
Yeah, I like this question a lot. And I kind of want to actually start with the second part about Ferguson, not to go too backwards, but I think he has all the potential to do just that and have a special year. But the only thing that gives me some hesitation there is that there's just so much talent around him. Like, I don't think that they need him necessarily to have a super special year. And I think that he is obviously proven to be one of the most valuable weapons in this Wolstein offense. But they distributed the ball so well last year. I think you actually saw his production dip a little bit. Not anything crazy or significant, but it did dip from what I was able to see with the numbers. Maybe I need to double check that one, but that's just from all the writing I've done. I feel like I remember that. So he's definitely a really talented player, but I don't know if he's going to have that special year just because there's so many talented guys for Dylan Gabriel to get the ball to. And then to talk about Stewart really quick, I think that he should be able to live up to the hype. If you just look at what he brings to the table physically, the quickness, the athleticism, the leaping ability, the catch radius, the ball skills, like he just checks all of your boxes that you're looking for in a wide receiver. And he already has some pretty decent production in the SEC. And then you pair that with Junior Adams, who is a phenomenal coach and developer of the position. I think he can become the number one wide receiver. But Tez Johnson certainly proved that he's worthy of all the targets he wants in this Oregon offense.
Yeah, and I think you'll see that point with both of these guys, and honestly, probably with Tez too, is just the multiple amount of targets we have this year. I think will kind of like even out the production a little bit relative to last year. I think you saw Tez and Troy really their numbers last year. I'd be surprised if any receiver in our room matches those numbers last year. And the same with Ferguson. I don't think you're going to see a huge jump in, numbers production. But what I think you will see is just balance across the board. And I think that's what Gabriel does best. And you'll see Stein be able to use a little bit deeper of a wide receiver room. I think Stewart, in terms of living up to the hype as being a number one, like if we're talking about winning one-on-one matchups and going against the guy's best, another team's best corner and winning, certainly. I mean, that guy has more talent than almost any receiver we've ever had. So I think if you're measuring in terms of production, I don't know that necessarily those guys are going to make some huge, massive jump. But I think just in terms of being open, being dependable, being the guys that we need for Ferguson, that's going to come down to like red zone a lot. I know Stein loves using him as like a red zone package, a lot of touches in that. I just think you'll see the depth across the board, maybe limit those guys from having like some amazing statistical year. But I think that they'll get everything they need to do to not only help the squad, obviously get to where they need to be, but those guys have NFL aspirations as per that conversation earlier. And I think that you'll see them flash all those skills that are going to make them get drafted probably in the first couple days this year.
This offense looks like it's going to be another special one, probably the best one that Will Stein's had. I don't know. I mean, it was a pretty special year last year, and it's going to take a special year to eclipse those numbers. But I mean, he's a tremendous coach, and this insane amount of talent that he has at his disposal, I think certainly gives him all the tools he needs to do just that. But I think that'll do it for us on today's episode, Travis. We got through a lot of great questions and just a little over 30 minutes. But really appreciate you guys being on for another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Before we get out of here, Travis, just any final words? Don't want to cut you off. I want to make sure you get to say your piece before you enjoy the rest of your trip.
For sure, for sure. No, grateful to be on. I would just encourage. I mean, this coming weekend in Eugene is going to be as big of a visitor list as I've seen in a long time in terms of names, stars, everything relating to that. So I would just plug what you mentioned at the start. Yourself, Justin, all the other guys over at On3 have been doing an incredible job right now. Having Steve Wilt following along has made a huge difference. So I would just encourage people coming off this weekend and a bunch of commitment dates lined up for Oregon targets the rest of this month. It's a super exciting time. So no better place to be than on there. And I'm certainly trying to prioritize being a little bit more of a presence on there. So find me over there too.
All right. All right. Well, if you guys want to find more Travis, you can follow him on Twitter/X at Travis Rooklay. If you want to find more of me, I am at M Torres Sports on all social media platforms. Subscribe to the Scoop Duck YouTube channel as we grow our community here. Check us out at scoopduck.com. Try us out. Just $1 gets you a whole month of premium access, and there's no better time. And then share the show, share the Duck Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. Big thank you to Travis for joining us while he's on vacation. And thanks to you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Duck Dish podcast.